people experience an opening into psychism, a realm of information that just is not available to the thinking self, in an extraordinary moment where they either come under pressure or they come into some state of grace. And so they're moved into a kind of point of view that is not a usual one.
Mm-hmm.
And many of the rest of us were not so graced by a higher experience at the beginning, but found a great deal of unusual perception, an unusual form of knowing, in the middle of extraordinary moments that might be called neurotic. And I think that that's a very common experience that people have, but they don't realize that a great deal of the source of their own information is not from their linear or their thinking self, but is actually from other parts of themselves that are equally intelligent, but not thinking. Not the thinking self.
You seem to be saying that if we could reflect on the shifts of attention that we have during the day in our stream of consciousness, we might discover quite a bit of psychic activity going on that we're just unconscious of.
Yes, and yet in a way everything depends on it, because our whole style of life depends on these kinds of shifts, or as you call them, slants of attention, that are particular to individuals and which we might call neurotic or unfinished from early childhood. They're kind of points of view that we get attached to, and we don't realize that there are extraordinary kinds of perception that support those points of view. For example, a child who has been traumatized, a frightened child, can become extraordinarily sensitive to the potential of anger in other people without realizing that they are focusing and recognizing through their body and through their inner mind the kind of aggressive possibilities in adults for protective reasons. And a child, kind of an opposite situation, just to give an example, a child who is dearly loved may learn how to tap into the available affection in people, how to keep the available love flowing in their direction, usually by merging with the wishes of others, knowing how to please, being very sensitive to minute changes in temperament in adults. And these are actual psychic potentials that can get way over the line of linear thinking without the individual realizing that they're doing something unusual.
You're reminding me of the story of the great Dutch psychic Gerard Croiset, who was hit on the head by a rock as a child and fell into some water, nearly drowned. And thereafter, much of his career, he died recently, but much of his career was devoted to being able to locate the bodies of missing children who had drowned. It's as if there was some kind of a wrinkle that got created through this early experience that opened up his own psychic perception in that particular area.
Yes. Yes, I think if we could do some expert plumbing and focus our attention deeply into our own neurotic functioning, we would find there a kind of a wellspring of particular ways in which we use our attention in order to derive the information that's, supports our point of view. And it's often the case that if the undercurrent is ready to have an opening, a psychic experience of some kind, then there's a kind of collusion between the unconscious that wants to express itself, the psychic potential that is lying dormant, that wants to come forward, and so it will instigate a situation for the individual to experience, like the example of your Dutch psychic. Or in my experience, I placed myself, without realizing it, in a very frightening set of circumstances that went on for a number of years. And in the midst of those experiences, a great deal of truly psychic information came forward, but it was so embedded in the context of my survival that I didn't realize I was trying to access a really important part of myself. And I think that we engineer circumstances, so to speak, so that we can recognize our own potential in a conscious way, and then it becomes a conscious ability and used very specifically rather than in a kind of unconscious and repetitive way.
This is an important insight, I think, that you have, because what you're suggesting is that what we normally call neuroses or psychological problems of one sort or another are really an effort from the deeper layers of the psyche to achieve freedom or psychic liberation of some sense. We put ourselves under stress in order to create psychic openings.
Yes. You know, there are always stories, and I've actually interviewed several people who have been under objectively dire circumstances for prolonged periods and had unusual experiences during the time that they were under pressure. These were concentration camp victims during the Second World War, camp survivors. And their powers, both healing powers, self-healing, and sometimes able to affect other people who were ill, transferred healing, and definite precognitions of the events that would befall their group that were helpful to the survival of their small group in the camps. Those experiences are not that unusual when ordinary people like ourselves are put under extraordinary circumstances. We always have the example of the mother who in an extreme case lifts the car off the child, you know, finding in some resource in herself to affect the situation. And in a very smaller way, in a reduced way, I think we do that all the time. We need to put ourselves into some sort of circumstance where we have to resort to a part of ourself that we're not usually used to dealing with. And I feel that's a real indicator. In fact, I think the neuroses, instead of being seen as something dark or, you know, negative, that they're a wellspring of buried, latent, almost out on the surface, almost ready to come up kinds of psychic abilities.